have a very broad mandate. The Waterfront Toronto, looking at economic development, looking at social issues, real estate, urban design. The mandate, again, kind of combining public good, innovation, job creation, and city building. Very interesting approach, which actually intrigued me enough to move my family to become part of this. Also, there was a track record they had produced. They had executed from the initial $1.5 billion investment, the seed capital that was provided by the three governments. There was a $10 billion market development response by the private sector to the investments, infrastructure, urban design, open spaces. And so, a 7X is a pretty good return on that ROI. And also, it was not just all condominiums. I mean, it was affordable housing, infrastructure, lots of public spaces, fast fiber, fastest fiber available in all of Canada, new streetcars, etc. So just to give you a sense of that, here you can see the promenade that along Queens Quay that was built in multiple phases. The new streetcar, which again, Waterfront Toronto not only did the design work and working with all the agencies, transit agencies and other municipal engineers, but we executed these. This intelligent community, the idea of inclusionary digital inclusion, very important to make it available at low cost to everyone. So there was actually a cross subsidy to make for anyone living in the waterfront have the fast fiber available. Very transformative in terms of looking at open space. Here you have this derelict leftover parking lot and transformed into the iconic Sugar Beach, which is really one of the key kind of images now. If you do Google Images, this is what will come up for Toronto. A lot of people, very open, people from all over Toronto come down to the waterfront with their families. Again, here you see another example of what was called the Tartary. This is where the leather, the slaughterhouses were. Very, very polluted area. Waterfront Toronto cleaned it up, and then working with Michael van Valkenburg from New York, also a Harvard professor, was able to come up with, looks like a park, but it's actually a berm to keep the floodwaters out of downtown Toronto, the core of the high-rises in the distance. Here you see the main thoroughfare, Queens Quay, right on the waterfront, signature, terrible front door, front porch, and Waterfront Toronto was able to combine not only the wonderful wave decks and the pedestrian, but the Martin Goodman bike trail goes 3,000 miles across Canada, and here's the Toronto section, the light rail, as well as the streets and the walking. So how to look at everything together, that all this area in blue as well as the downtown were flooding. And with that creation of that park that I mentioned a few slides earlier, it took the floodplain out of this area, and therefore the investment to come across this highway and start to put private investment now that it was out of the floodplain. So very good public investment of infrastructure. So I think we need to take a breath here and say, if resilience is the answer, what exactly is the question that we're answering? And I think what's happened is that when we look at what forms cities, whether it's the policies, the codes, the funding and risk, procurement protocols, partnerships, innovations, and just decision-making in general, they are primarily backward-looking. They are looking at historical situations. We had this unusual alignment of policy initiatives between the federal government, the provincial government, and the city regarding climate change. The Paris Accords had been adopted in late 2015, early 2016, right as I arrived in Toronto, and we had a new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who had just initiated a very forward climate thinking agenda. A lot of pilots and research projects. There were new tax incentives and new infrastructure, similar to what Biden's trying to do now at a Canadian scale, billions of dollars now being available. And there was also a problem in terms of how to deal with data privacy that needed to be addressed. The idea of decision dynamics, of where was industry and what were they willing to do, and in fact, the province of Ontario had decarbonized its electrical generation to using nuclear and hydro. So that part of it had already taken a leap forward away from coal. But we also were starting to form new coalitions and looking at procurement and how do you allow for innovation to occur. And in my discussions with the innovation minister in Ottawa, he said, well, we really need a new model for how to bring forward-thinking innovation technology into the way that we look at city development. And there was a real urgency because of the lack of affordable housing in Toronto. The market matrix, obviously, how could we adjust the standards and the specifications, look at a new way of risk capital over the long term. And there was a huge demand, both by businesses and individuals who were looking for commercial space, huge movie business here, and they wanted to expand. How do you apply it? You're applying the resilience across three basic buckets. There is an infrastructure piece, which Kate talked to, where you're looking at energy, mobility, landscape, wastewater, a real estate, a vertical development of building construction, and yes, a technology systems of connected sensors and systems. You need to apply all three of these together if you're going to really talk about creating a resilient city. And then the scale. We've talked a little bit about the project and precinct scale, but now we have to say, how do we take that to the next level to a citywide and regional? And yes, even some of those lessons learned could be applied to new codes and new developments across borders.